Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scriptures for April the 2nd. Your readings for today would have been Deuteronomy chapter 23, 24, and 25, Luke chapter 10, 13 through 37, Psalm 75, and Proverbs chapter 12, verses 12 through 14. Now today we see really two great examples of God's compassion and mercy for people, for those that are helpless. One of the big mandates of the church is to take care of orphans and widows, those who are fatherless, those who are husbandless, those people who have greater disadvantages because of a great loss in their lives. God has great compassion on those kind of people. And we see that in both Deuteronomy and Luke today. If you look in Deuteronomy and you start looking at the various laws that he writes out in 23, 24, and 25, you start to notice there's a pattern that God will lay out a law, but then he also puts in a little bit of an addendum to make sure that someone else is taken care of. For example, in Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 12, it talks about what it means to have a neighbor. But if the neighbor is poor, don't go to sleep with their pledge in your possession. In other words, make sure they're not cold. There's another one where it talks about do not deprive the foreigner or the fatherless of justice. Okay? Talks about when you're harvesting a field, don't go back. Make sure and leave some extra on the ground for those who need it, those who are needy. And that actually is a very important story and a very important rule that we will discover here later. But we see a lot of great compassion that comes into this. We see a lot of exceptions that God places for the poor and for the needy. So we fast forward to Luke chapter 10, and we see the parable of the Good Samaritan. Now remember, parables, when Jesus tells them, these are simple stories with a simple point. You can have a lot of time. You can take a lot of time to analyze and to try to look at every which direction. But you got to be careful about that because you don't want to lose the important point of the parable. You don't want to put the cart before the horse. So in the case of the Good Samaritan, it's asking the question, who is my neighbor? And Jesus uses this story of the Samaritan. Now remember, we've talked about the Samaritans before. The Samaritans are detestable people. So as soon as Jesus said there was a Samaritan man, instantly the people listening, the Jewish people listening, would have had possibly a physical reaction, but at least one of revulsion, one of, ugh, Samaritan, ugh. So, there's a very powerful story that's going on here when the detestable, the lowest of the low, are the ones showing the compassion. So Jesus walks through the different people, and he talks about a man going down, and he fell among robbers from Jericho to Jerusalem. So going down, it's talking about how Jerusalem is up on a hill, okay, and Jericho's down the mountain. So just so there's a nice visual, when he says down to, it's not like Texas, all right? When we talk about, well, I'm going to take a trip, I'm going to go down to Nebraska. You don't go down to Nebraska, but in this case, Jesus is literally saying, we're going down to Jericho. So then his simple story comes in, he says a priest passes him on the road and sees him and passes on the other side. The people would have immediately thought the priest should help, right? I mean, they're called to help people, right? He didn't. And then a Levite comes. It's like a priest. It's in the same lineage of the priest. It is a person that's been set aside to care for the temple of God. And also, don't forget, Levites were the hosts of the mercy cities. Okay, in other words, these are people that should have compassion, and they didn't. But then a Samaritan, and there's that visceral reaction. Whoa, there's the Samaritan. He came and he had compassion. God has compassion on all of humanity, even the people that we find the most detestable, even the people that we have the most visceral reactions to. And you say, come on, Jeremy, this is the 2020s, this is 2024. We don't have, yes, we do. Some of our visceral reactions come because of political affiliation. Some of them come because of decisions that they've made in their lives. Whatever the reason is, there are people in our lives that we have visceral reactions to, that there's something about them that just gets our blood boiling or something. They need compassion. We need to give them compassion. The Samaritan could have looked at this Jewish man and said, you know what? You hate me. I hate you. Let's go on. He didn't. He had great compassion. So that's our lesson. Who is our neighbor? The answer is everyone. Every single one. Okay, There's our conversation for today. We'll talk more tomorrow.